The arena boiled with electricity as two of the most talked-about fighters in modern combat sports stepped into the ring. Jake Paul, the YouTube superstar turned knockout artist, and Nate Diaz, the Stockton legend whose chin, attitude, and fearlessness have defined a generation of fans. From the moment they walked out, it felt less like a fight and more like an earthquake winding up beneath the canvas. Jake, focused and sharp, marched with the confidence of a man on a mission, absorbing every boo, every cheer, every shout, turning them into fuel. On the other side, Nate Diaz walked in with his trademark smirk, loosening his arms, nodding at the crowd like he had walked into a street fight rather than a professional boxing ring. The tension climbed with every second. Cameras zoomed in on Jake's intense stare, then on Nate's calm, taunting grin, making the moment feel like a fuse burning toward an explosion. Even the referee seemed aware that this wasn't a normal matchup. This was a collision of two completely different worlds, two very different energies, both dangerous in their own way. As they approached the center of the ring, the audience went silent, sensing history tightening around them like a rope pulling from every side. Jake's gloves twitched with anticipation. Nate's shoulders rolled with that relaxed, Stockton swagger that drove fans wild. And then, cutting through the silence with the force of a thunderclap, the bell rang. The crowd erupted instantly as Jake exploded forward with a fast jab, catching Nate early. Nate smirked, wiped his nose, and stepped in closer. Just like that, the war had begun, and every fan in the arena knew this fight wouldn't be ordinary. It would be chaos, heart, violence, and unpredictability blended into one unforgettable night. As the second round began, Jake Paul tightened his footwork, circling Nate with sharp, calculated movements that showed he wasn't here to entertain. He was here to dominate. His jabs snapped out like a piston, each one pushing Nate back a step, but the Stockton warrior absorbed them with that unshakable chin, raising his hands like he was daring Jake to throw harder. The crowd roared as Nate began taunting, dropping his hands, stepping forward, leaning into Jake's punches just to show he wasn't going anywhere. Jake responded with a massive right hand that cracked across the arena, sending a ripple of shock through the audience. Nate stumbled for just a moment, but then smiled, shaking his head, walking straight toward Jake like a man who felt no pain at all. The energy in the ring transformed instantly. Jake began unloading combinations, but Nate kept stalking him, talking to him, pointing at him, making the fight feel more personal with every jab thrown. Sweat sprayed into the lights as Jake landed a sharp left hook, but Nate answered with a flurry of furious body shots. Crowd chanting wildly as he pushed Jake to the ropes. The pace quickened. The punches grew heavier. Jake tried to fire back, but Nate's pressure was suffocating, dragging him into deeper waters. The referee watched closely, knowing Nate's style could drown even experienced fighters. The punches echoed louder, the crowd grew wilder, and suddenly the fight no longer felt like a contest. It felt like a street battle disguised in gloves and rules. When the bell finally rang, neither man stepped back. They stared at each other, breathing hard, daring the next round to begin. By the midway point of the fight, both men were breathing hard, sweat dripping from their chins, gloves thudding with the force of fighters who refused to slow down. Jake Paul began landing his best punches, sharp rights and punishing hooks that made the crowd gasp with each impact. His youth, size, and power were undeniable. Every punch felt like it could change the fight instantly. But Nate Diaz was built for wars like this. Every time he was hit clean, he walked forward, chin high, hands waving Jake in closer, daring him to hit harder. The more Jake landed, the more Nate smirked, taunted, and talked, pushing Jake deeper into emotional territory. Jake attempted to stay disciplined, slipping punches and countering with crisp combinations, but Nate's relentless pressure was like a shadow he couldn't escape. Suddenly, Nate exploded with a vicious combination, left, right, left, that rocked Jake backward, sending sweat flying. The arena shook with chaos as Diaz poured forward, unleashing a barrage of punches that forced Jake into a defensive retreat. The referee moved closer, sensing danger, but Jake fired a monstrous uppercut that snapped Nate's head back, halting the assault instantly. The crowd roared as the momentum swung violently between the two. Both men suddenly stood in the center of the ring, trading punches with reckless abandon. Jake relying on power, Nate relying on heart and durability. Every exchange felt like it could be the last. When the bell sounded, fans jumped to their feet, realizing they were witnessing not a circus, not a gimmick, but a war. Entering the late rounds, exhaustion should have slowed them, but instead, it sharpened their instincts, making every punch thrown feel like the final chapter of a book written in blood and courage. Lewis maintained his reach advantage, circling Holyfield with a predator's patience. His punches had become heavier, more deliberate, the kind that could shatter a chin if landing clean. Holyfield, battered but unbroken, kept pressing forward, like a machine fueled by something beyond human endurance. The crowd chanted loudly, unsure who would break first. Holyfield caught Lewis with a short uppercut inside, a punch so perfectly timed that it snapped Lewis's head upward. The arena exploded. Lewis stumbled for a moment. Holyfield surged in, firing punches that echoed across the arena like thunderclaps. But then, like a lion cornered, Lewis unleashed a devastating counter-right that stopped Holyfield dead in his tracks. They stood toe-to-toe again, swinging with everything they had left, sweat flying, gloves cracking, hearts pounding. The bell ended the round, but neither man looked relieved. They knew the final storm was approaching. As the final round began, both fighters rose from their corners with the look of men who refused to accept anything less than victory. Lewis, breathing heavily yet still composed, stepped toward the center with the calmness of a champion who knew he was inches away from sealing history. Holyfield, bruised, swollen, and shaking, but still burning with unstoppable will, marched forward with the spirit of a man who had never surrendered in his life. The crowd roared louder than at any moment before, sensing that this last round might define both careers forever. Lewis fired a brutal combination, snapping Holyfield's head back, but the American answered instantly with a left hook that detonated against Lewis's jaw. Both men wobbled for a moment, both regained balance, and both stepped right back into the fire without hesitation. The punches grew wild, heavy, desperate, yet each packed enough force to end the fight at any second. Lewis hammered a monstrous right hand that nearly turned Holyfield's legs to jelly, but Holyfield clinched, recovered, and returned fire with a vicious body shot that made Lewis grunt. The final seconds ticked slowly, painfully, as if time itself didn't want this war to end. When the bell finally rang, the crowd erupted into chaos, cheers, screams, disbelief. Because what they had witnessed was not just a fight. It was a war between two men who refused to break, a masterpiece of heart, violence, strategy, and unshakable will. No matter the decision, both had proven something eternal. Legends aren't chosen. They are forged in battles like this.